What's going on, guys? It's Cimo. Now, today I wanted to bring you a discussion on the topic of why overthinking loses you games. Now, this may seem like complete common sense, but I think this is an opportunity for a lot of us to look at this and really kind of learn something from this notion. Now, the reason I wanted to bring this up is because Yu-Gi-Oh! Can be a very cerebral game. I mean, when you come and watch one of my discussion videos or another discussion video of your favorite Yu-Gi tuber, or if you're scouring the internet looking for, meta-analyses or deck profiles or anything like that, this game can be very left-brained, and there's a lot of information that's out there to be captured and acquired. And I feel like what happens is, especially for the small minority of players that really want to see themselves just do better at the game, see themselves start winning a lot more, or really the even smaller minority of players that really want to just win an event, for example, like a YCS or even the national championship, I feel like what happens is we kind of fall into the tendency of really trying to acquire as much information as humanly possible, and what happens is it almost becomes overwhelming because naturally, I think a lot of us would agree that logically, if we're going to want to prepare for a YCS or the national championship or any event that you're trying to win, then it would make the most sense to look up as much information about the event prior to the event as possible, whether you're looking at meta-analysis of what people think are going to be the decks to beat, or deck profiles or tech choices that people might be figuring out, or discussing amongst your circle of friends or anything like that, what might be the best strategies moving into that event. There's a lot of different facets and avenues that you can take when it comes to the cerebral part of Yu-Gi-Oh! But what I think is what happens is there's this massive competitive over-analysis, and it almost just becomes completely flawed because what ends up happening is you start doing all this analysis and your brain just starts churning and churning and churning, and when you get to the event, sometimes you'll just make plays that make absolutely no sense because of the fact that in your head, you're almost just so fixated on the mentality of over-analysis that you're just completely blindsided by something that's purely practical or something that's not even capable of happening. So the fact that it overrides common sense is huge. Now, the reason why I want to talk about this is that this actually happened to me at UDS Las Vegas. So in one of my rounds, I was playing against a Blue Eyes player, and I was playing Zodiac. And during the game, I don't remember the specifics of which game it was, but during the game, I had complete control of the board. I mean, I had like 4 or 5 monsters on the board. I had 2 to 3 to 4 back row. The board was like incredibly intimidating, and my opponent did not really have a board at all. I think he was top decking or might have had only 1 or 2 cards at his disposal. And what ended up happening was I got in my over-analysis mindset because this was around the time that everyone started main decking the Mirror Forces in order to combat Zodiac. Cards like Mirror Force, Storming Mirror Force in particular, Quaking Mirror Force, and things like that for context. So what happened was I actually had the opportunity to attack for game, and I believe this might have been the match game. So if I would have attacked for game, I would have won the match and moved on to the next round. What would happen was, because I know so many players were playing a card like Storming Mirror Force, I actually second-guessed myself and said, okay, how do I lose this game? And the only way I really lost, in my mind at the time, was if I got blown out by Storming Mirror Force. So what I ended up doing instead is I switched my Trident to defense mode, and then I just attacked with everything else and slowly picked away at his life points. And what ended up happening was I had a Speedroid Terror Top in attack mode that I used to attack instead of using the Whip Tail, which I could have done the extra damage with the Trident by equipping it. And then on his next turn, he just completely turned the entire game around. I ended up popping a Dragon Spirit of White or something along those lines, but then he chained it to summon a normal Blue Eyes out of his hand. And then what happened was because the fact that I was only on 1,800 life points, Blue Eyes is on 3,000 attack, Terror Top's 1,200. He attacked and I lost because I had no battle traps and my Trident had no more. I already used my Trident to try and attempt to pop something because I didn't think he actually had a way to out it in his hands. So I ended up losing that game because of the fact I was so focused on the fact that Storming Mirror Force was such a real threat in that meta, but it completely overrided my common sense at the fact that I was playing a fucking Blue Eyes player, and Blue Eyes play like no fucking traps. The only trap they might play at the time is Vanity's Emptiness because it was still legal, and maybe Solemn Strikes. But the fact that if there would have been a Blue Eyes player playing Mirror Forces, that would have just been unheard of. But what happened was, I guess I was 4 steps ahead in thinking. I was thinking that, okay, maybe he's thinking that because he's playing Blue Eyes, I'm not going to think that he's playing a Mirror Force, and he has a Mirror Force, so if I attack with everything, I actually just end up losing the game. But it was just a case of pure tunnel vision and just really just overriding common sense at the fact that I could have just attacked and won because it's a Blue Eyes player and Blue Eyes plays no back row. So the fact that I think this, and this is just one instance, I'm sure that all of you guys have an example as well of a time that maybe you were just completely overthinking something that was really simple, and either it cost you a game or something, it cost you a match or something like that as well. And I feel like when you get in that mentality of tunnel vision and you're just so fixated on what's in front of you without really thinking logically or practically, or I guess, again, from a common sense perspective, that it can really just fault you and almost sabotage your gameplay moving forward. I think what also happens is that as a competitive player, if you're really trying to better yourself and do well on a competitive level, I think there's this tendency of the notion of the perfect play. And I feel like where this comes from is there's a lot of scrutiny in the Yu-Gi-Oh community where if you don't make the perfect or the most optimal play, that you almost get criticized, especially by people that are watching your match around you, say if you got friends or something around you like that. And if you don't make that perfect play, there's almost like a fear of possibly being judged by everyone who's watching you because you didn't make the right play, and then that's just going to almost put you on tilt or something like that. But because we're so fixated on making the perfect play and getting the best amount of card advantage for what we have, or just generating the best board state, I think it really, again, overrides any sort of common sense, like the example I gave you guys from my experience, that you might not even just completely realize that you're overthinking it entirely and that you're just completely wasting your time, that you could have just won the game, won the match, whatever it may be. So I think what this comes down to is, how do we really fix this mentality? How do we break ourselves from the cycle of really being fixated on the perfect play, or fixated on a mindset of overanalyzing every single little thing that our opponents might be doing? And I think the best way to do that is to really separate the mindsets. I feel like a mindset of analysis is very strong before a tournament. You know, if you're wanting to look up every single top deck from the previous events before the event that you're about to attend, or every single meta analysis you can get your hands on, or find any video about someone talking about the most random tech card you could possibly think of but might actually be effective, then that's totally fine. But I think that mentality and the mentality that you have when you're actually playing and executing your moves should be two separate things, because if you've been practicing for this event for, weeks on end, leading up till the event, I feel like it's almost like if you're playing a sport. You've been practicing a lot and now you're actually playing. When you're playing a sport, you're trusting your instincts because the practice you've put in, is adapted to your muscle memory, and then you don't really need to think about what you're doing. You're just doing it, you're in the moment, and you're playing. I think that same logic can actually apply to Yu-Gi-Oh! As well. By the time you're going into this event, you should know all of your deck's combos, or at least all of your deck's most potent combos and how to execute them, which cards are required for those combos, how to best handle certain situations against certain meta decks, and things like that. And I feel like if you've already been practicing leading up to this, you shouldn't have to be thinking about how to do it. It should just be pure muscle memory, because you know the exact sequencing of moves you have to do in order to properly execute that and take the board back into your favor. So by separating those two mentalities and leaving the analysis for before the match and really leaving the execution and the instincts and let the practice you've put in really do its work when you're actually in the game by being present, not being extremely left-brained when you're there across sitting from your opponent, really duking it out, you know, for every single last little life point. I think that's ultimately the best way to break that cycle of overanalysis and not letting yourself fall into the trap of tunnel vision. And honestly, it could possibly save you a game, and that could really mean a lot in the grand scheme of a tournament when you have to play so many rounds and win so many rounds in order to do well. But guys, that's just my opinion on the subject. Let me know down in the comments what your guys' experiences are with tunnel vision, a time where you overthought something because you were just so focused on something else, but there was just an extremely simple scenario that could have been equally, if not better, than the one that you were thinking about. I'd really love to hear these stories because I'm sure we've all had them, and I'm pretty sure they've probably all cost us a game or two here and there. So again, thank you so much for watching the video. Be sure to like the video as always, subscribe to the channel for more amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content, and also be sure to back me on Patreon, because just by pledging $1 a month, you're investing in my ability to continue bringing you amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content. So thanks so much again, and we'll see you next time.